Here's the deal. I know for a fact that I'm not a scholar.
That's true.
No question about it. I'll readily admit that. But I do know that there is a difference between a man and a woman.
Yes.
Why is that such a struggle in our society?
Confusion.
It is definitely confusion. I think some of it's confusion, and some of it I think is delusion.
Right.
I think people's minds are delusional. And I say that often, and I get a lot of pushback whenever I bring that about on social media or wherever the case may be, putting a statement out. But we have so many delusional people in our society. And when you look at the percentage of people that are delusional, it's not the greater majority of people. But then you have what you often talk about, right?
Guided compassion.
Misguided and misplaced compassion. So these people that see these delusional people and they fall prey to their narrative. And so here we are right now as we're recording this podcast. There's some discussion that's going on a bill in Congress to make sure that men are not allowed to play in women's sports.
Which has always just been a question of mine. Why would a man want to compete in women's sports?
That's a good question. And I have some ideas as to why I think that they do. But if you go all the way back to 2022 here in Kentucky, we decided as a legislature to address that issue. Okay. And so we had a bill, and the bill was pretty blanketed. It just said, nowhere in sports can males and females compete with each other if it was not an open sport, you know. So we had that bill. It was being discussed, and all of a sudden attacks began to come from every direction. There was the big colleges came, and they were pushing back on it. And then some of the schools came, and they were pushing back on it. And then what happened was we made the bill totally about fairness. And when they began to try to win on the argument of fairness, they stripped out what I believe is the most impressionable time for young people, the kindergarten through the 5th grade. And so we ended up passing the bill that said from 6th grade on, if it is a sport that is boys or girls only, that no boy could compete in girls' sports and vice versa. And we left it open for all the other grades or those earlier grades. And I said this at the time, and I stand by this, because young people, because kids are so impressionable and their character is molded at such a young age, then a lot of religions will tell you, like, if you give me your child until they're 5, I will keep them in this religion the rest of their life, because that's where they pick up on a lot of their character and their traits. And so my point is if you allow them to be deceived and to fall prey to this delusion up until the 5th grade, and then you're trying to tell them, well, you're really not a girl, so you can't play on the girls' team anymore. You're going to have to compete on the boys' team. We'd almost been better off to have flipped that and teach them that at an early age.
Now that bill, did it go into effect?
Yes, we ended up passing the bill.
Is that just for elementary and high school? Was it college?
Yes, it was
across the board?
Middle school, high school, and college. We took out the kindergarten through 5th grade. So 6th grade through 12th grade, and then all of college as well.
Okay.
So we fixed the issue somewhat, but this has been my argument, is this issue is not primarily or necessarily about fairness. It's about fact.
Right.
It's about what's right. It's about common sense. And what we are doing, we are messing with the common sense and the God-ordained structure that he placed in this world. He said in the very beginning, He created male and female. And I say this often, that there are only males and females, and neither can become the other. And that's a fact. And so we do this all the time. We will make things that we're dealing with in law about an issue that you can win on in the public mindset.
Right.
Like even the people that are bleeding hearts for delusional people, they understand the fairness thing, right? So it's like, well, that's true. You know, when you look at males, they have 25 to 50% more strength than females do on average.
Right.
They have, more muscle mass. They have more testosterone. They have all of these things and traits that are different than men. So the fairness argument is kind of a winning argument to some degree.
Right.
But when you make it about fairness and only about fairness, and we don't reinforce that this is about fact and right, then we lose the culture.
Right. So what is the fear of simply stating that if you are a man, then you can't play in women's sports, or you can't pretend that you are a woman?
Because we have a group in society that believes that if a person, or they say they believe, that if a man thinks he's a woman and says that he's a woman, that makes him a woman. The only problem is they don't call him a woman. They call him a trans woman.
Right. And so if you're a true woman, I'm a woman. I don't have to have anything in front of that. So if you're a woman, you're a woman. So why the trans woman? And they say trans women are real women, right?
Right.
So there is no such thing. You're either a woman or you're not a woman.
Exactly. But that is the argument that they make. And so
do men say, do they do the same thing? Because I know I've heard trans women are real women. Do they say trans men are real men?
I assume they are, but this is what you'll find. Very few men publicly, or women, that come out in society and claim to be men in comparison to men that claim to be women.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I'll tell you from an adult standpoint, okay? When we're just dealing with just adults, I'm going to say it's because they're perverts.
Okay.
So, and let's break that down for just a minute,
okay.
All right? So we're talking about getting in women's locker rooms.
Right.
We're talking about getting in women's bathrooms.
Right.
We're talking about getting in women's prisons.
Right. Right.
I mean, what man would not say, oh, I'm a woman, if he's going to prison so he could get in a women's prison?
Yeah.
And so I think some of it is predatory and they're perverts. And it's that simple. People don't like it when you call it out, but I'm going to tell you, if there's a grown man that wants to be in the bathroom where my daughter is, he's a predator and a pervert. And I'm going to have a problem with it. And I don't need a bill. I don't need a law to stop that from happening. I will handle that if I'm aware and in the place to be able to know the situation's going on and to stop it.
So if that happened, that scenario, say that our daughter was in a bathroom and someone came in that was obviously a biological male, and you addressed the situation, you need to get out, there would be people with that misplaced compassion that you made him as a her feel bad. So what can we do to encourage people to still stand up for, because I feel like that our daughter deserves that.
Yes.
No, she's not the bad person in this. The person coming in her space is the one that needs to be addressed, but it's twisted around to where our daughter would be the one to, like, why did you have a problem with him coming in the bathroom?
I've had a similar situation like this happen. It just so happened that at this place, my daughter was there the day before. She wasn't there with me the day that this man went into the women's bathroom. I didn't see any other woman in there, but I made sure to go get security. I made them aware that there's a man in the girls' bathroom. My daughter was here with me yesterday. If it so happens that I bring her back and he goes in there with her, we are going to have major problems. Can you address it? And they did address it and made sure that that man knew to use the men's restroom or to use the single family restroom while he was there, to keep that situation from escalating. But this is the thing, is that because people are afraid to take a stand, we have promoted boldness in that delusional culture. And so they believe that somehow these men believe that they have the right to be in the women's bathroom or the women's locker room.
Which is considered a safe space, technically.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I should be able to assume that if I'm going into a women's restroom, that I will only encounter women and babies. You know, they may have a small boy with them if they're not old enough to go to the restroom on their own. But I should be able to assume that. That's a given.
Right.
Right? That and a lot of your liberal ideas, they want you to have safe spaces, right? Where you feel safe. Why is it wrong for women to want to have a safe space to where I don't want to encounter a man during going into a bathroom, which is a personal thing?
Yeah. Well, think about this just real quick from the fairness standpoint. Okay. So men have inherent physical advantages over women. Full stop. That's not even a question. Right.
Yeah.
So they're making the argument on that they should be able to compete, but we know that is a fact. The physiological aspects of it, 25 to 30% more muscle mass, 10 to 50% greater strength and speed due to testosterone. We know, with Will Thomas, who called himself Leah.
Yes.
He was not even an average male swimmer and then comes over to the female side of the sport and then begins to dominate and ends up taking a trophy from a girl in girl sports. And they stand them both up on a platform and because they tied, they give him the trophy and tell her, we will send you one.
But it's more important that he has it.
Okay.
But listen, that's pretty bad. If he is a he and he tied with a she, shows that he shouldn't have been on anybody's swim team.
Well, that's exactly right. So they brought in the fairness aspect of it. But this is the behind the scenes. This is the fact part of it. Is that not only was it not fair for them to compete with him, he was in their locker room.
And
fully intact as a male.
And he did unclothe himself.
In front of them, which should have been indecent exposure. And this is my question.
Why is it not?
This is the thing that I cannot wrap my mind around. Is why was there not one man somewhere in the vicinity of where that happened,
besides Will,
that would have cleared all the women out of that locker room and told him to get out, and if he didn't get out, pitched him out and said, you do not belong in here exposing yourself to women. You are a man. Where were the men?
I don't know.
And I am thankful that Riley Gaines has been a leader in this. She has more backbone than, most men in our society in regard to this issue. Yeah. She has stood up for herself. She has stood up for other women. She stood up for fairness, for common sense. She's been very vocal about it. Why did she have to? Was there not a coach? Was there not somebody around in her life or in that arena that would have stood up and said, this is not okay. It's not going to happen. You're a man.
Why do you think that?
Well,
why do you think nobody stood up?
Just a couple weeks ago, there was a 15-year-old girl that was going to play a basketball game. She played sports in high school. She goes out on the court and she sees a boy out there. And so she went to her coach and she told the coach, she said, or asked the coach, is that a boy? And the coach basically told her, well, we're not going to be demeaning. We're not going to be mean. We're not going to disrespect people. And so she said, I'm not playing. So she went and sat down on the bench. They let the instead of stopping saying, well, we would rather you play since this is a girls' basketball game, they let her sit on the bench. They let the boy play. Well, being a young girl, and you know how young girls can be a little emotional, so she gets a little bit upset. And after a while, she kind of had it. So she walked over to the bench where the boy was sitting, and she said, you're a boy, and walked off and walked out of the arena. And they filed an ethics complaint against her.
The school?
The sports group that they were, that represented the high school sports, they filed an ethics complaint against her and basically said that she was disrespectful to that boy.
Then
That's why they don't speak up.
How was she not disrespected?
She was disrespected.
Would they take an ethics complaint about that?
Well, this is the thing. What ended up happening was she went very vocal about it. She was very vocal about it. She ended up on Fox News and Newsmax, and some people started interviewing her and her mom stood by her and stood with her. And they ended up changing their policy that boys can't play with girls. But this is the thing. It comes back to the same question. Was there not one man in that gym that had enough fortitude to walk down there on that court and say, these girls are not playing with that boy? But there wasn't. And so a 15-year-old girl had to take a stand, and she had to refuse to back up in order to get the policy changed. And again, they made the policy based on fairness. They're saying, well, it's really not fair. It's not that it's just not fair. It's not right.
Right. Yeah, it's not. That's just so bizarre that we're having this conversation.
It is.
That you would have to explain that to people. I just don't understand that. So I know that Trump signed an executive order recently about keeping women's sports fair and safe and only women competing. So does that affect every state?
So this is kind of
because
what's going on.
You said this just happened with this young girl, right?
That's week? Correct.
When
that's correct.
He had already signed the order.
And the mom went to the coach and said, President Trump signed an executive order and this is not right. And they basically said, we're going to do our own thing.
Can they do their own thing?
They can, but this is the thing with that. First of all, this issue, like in my mind, it's at least an 80-20 issue. If you read some of the polls, they're saying 70-30, 75-25. It's at least an 80-20 issue. And why the leftist delusionals always want to be on the 20% on these issues, I don't understand. Keep doing it. Keep advocating for it, because we'll get more good people in office if these leftist politicians keep advocating for the 20% of the issue instead of getting on the right side of the issue. So what happened, President Trump signed the executive order, and what it does is that it affects federal funding. So basically what happens, they can do whatever they want to do, but if they don't follow the law, they're going to lose federal funding, which if people watched and saw what happened, President Trump had all the governors there from the United States in a governor's meeting, and he brought up this issue, and he said, this is what's going on. I've signed the law or the executive order. We're going to keep men out of women's sports. And I've heard that Maine is not going to follow the law. Is the governor from Maine here? And she spoke up and she's like, yeah, we're here. And he said, are you not going to follow the law? And I think she said, well, we're going to follow federal and state law. And he said, well, we made the federal law. And she basically rebutted with him. And she said, we'll see you in court. And he said, sure thing. Yeah. We'll see you in court. We'll easily win on this issue. And you probably need to look for another type of career because you're not going to keep getting reelected if you continue to push on these delusional issues.
I do think that it has, it was a little more popular to say, to be for that maybe a year or so ago. I do think that even people that were compassionate towards that or maybe trying to be understanding are just coming back to the common ground of boys can't play against girls in sports because, I mean, number one, if you're a boy, you're a boy. We know that, but it's not safe.
Right.
And I don't know why that governor wouldn't be able to logically think that through. If you have a daughter that's playing volleyball against somebody, if she's in ninth grade, they're playing high school volleyball, she's ninth grade and maybe he's a junior or a senior and he spikes the ball, it could give her a concussion. It's
happened.
Okay.
There's a young lady that's been going around and advocating for these laws to prevent boys from being in girls' sports or men being in women's sports. And that's exactly what happened. She had, I think, a traumatic brain injury from that and has lost some of her sight. She's never going to get it back. And she's just trying to warn people just about the fairness aspect and about the safety aspect of it. And since 2020, I think over 30 states have filed bills and 21 states have enacted laws as of the end of 2024 to address this. This is one thing that is interesting to me, and I bring it back to where are the men at in these girls' lives. So in Maine, where that governor said that she would see the president's administration in court over this issue, there was a state representative there. Her name is Representative Laurel Libby, and she had posted something on social media. It was where a boy had won in a girls' sporting event. And she posted it was a public picture, and she posted a picture of those young people and, just said it wasn't right and that, we need to follow the law. The state legislature censured her.
Oh.
They brought her before the Speaker of the House in the House of Representatives there, and they censured her. They told her she could not speak on the House floor and she could not vote on the House floor until she made a public apology for just calling out natural biology.
Really? When did that happen?
This happened just in the last week.
So has she apologized?
She won't apologize. She said, I am not going to apologize. And this is the thing: if you see the video or see the picture from where it happened, she's literally standing down there like before this man that thinks he's some authority figure, telling her, unless you apologize and unless you come before this body and say that you shouldn't have done what you did, you can't speak in here anymore and you can't vote anymore. Was there not one other man in that house
that would object?
That would have objected, would have said, hang on just a minute. No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to treat that woman that way. You're not going to speak this delusion in the people's house. It's not going to happen.
But they all went along with it.
But they went right along with it.
So she can't vote on anything?
No.
Or until she apologizes.
She cannot represent the people
her
that
district.
duly elected her until she, quote unquote, apologizes for what she did.
So apparently that must be in the rules.
On social media. It is. It fell under some rule that they have, but it's some...
Because it doesn't seem right constitutionally that you can't be the voice for your people.
It's not, and they would have to have unconstitutional rules to be able to enforce that upon her, which is a lot of time what happens whenever these crazy leftists get in power. Then they make the rules to be able to maintain their power and to enforce their will upon everybody and keep everybody in line as they want to.
So she basically called out that a boy that won in girls' sports shouldn't actually be the winner because he's not a girl.
Right.
Is that what? Okay.
And this is the thing. I hope that people understand this, that letting this go on is not kindness.
Right. But that's what they feel. They are emotionally, they're led in a wrong way emotionally to where they feel compassionate. And I do too.
Yeah.
I feel sorry. I have sympathy. I have compassion towards people that are struggling.
Yes.
That are not confident in who they are or what they're about. I do. But it's not the right thing to let them believe a lie or lead them further into a lie, because then the damage is worse later. It's better to address it at the beginning, but they feel compassion. They feel sorry for them, and they think that that's the answer, and it's not the answer.
Right. But if you have what they call kindness without truth,
yeah,
it's just a false virtue signaling. That's all that it is. And so
but you have to, I just have to think in my mind that there are people, to try to make it make sense.
Yeah.
That there are people that feel like this is the right thing to do. Therefore, that's why I'm doing it. Because you have people that know that this is a boy, this is a girl. They can't become the other. But these kids that are struggling, or these young adults that are struggling, if they feel in their heart that this is what they want to do, I'm going to encourage them. And I think they feel they have that emotional struggle because they don't want to make them further depressed or do anything that would hinder them. I think they think they're doing the right thing.
I think to some degree
some of them,
yes.
Some people, yes. I do feel like there's a nucleus of people that they legitimately feel like they're doing the right thing. I do think you have some people that know what they're doing and they have an agenda. And then I do think you have people that are delusional, meaning they have,
yes.
even though they've been presented with facts, they choose to believe something different.
Right.
And the longer they do that, the more delusional they become.
Well, I believe it was in 1972 when Title IX was put in place to give women equal footing from a sports perspective. Right. And then what happened is it was really in the 2000s when this gender ideology began to creep in, and we seen policies were bent, people began to cave and to give into this. And then in the 2020s, the NCAA and specifically the Olympics, they just went all out with this. Right. I mean, we are not very far removed from seeing a boxing match where a man gets out there and just beats the bloody pulp out of a woman, and people are cheering it on.
And they get a trophy.
And
so that is, if that was in any other scenario, okay, if a man was to punch a woman in the face, right, on the street, would he get in legal trouble?
Yes.
If it was unprovoked and he just knocks a woman out, okay. If a man is charged with indecent exposure, meaning exposing body parts in an inappropriate way that makes people feel uncomfortable,
mm-hmm.
you know, would they be arrested? Would they be?
Yes.
Okay. So why does that change in the name of sports?
I think it's because people give in to the delusion. They give in. You have these organizations. So think about it. Think about this. Just not too long ago, the Biden administration had signed an executive order, and they were trying to put gender identity into Title IX so that a man could identify as a woman and legally play in women's sports. And they threatened federal funding, if people were not going to follow that law. And there were people that cheered that on. And then President Trump comes in and says, we're not doing any of this, and you're not going to get federal funding if you allow this to happen, and we're bigots.
It just don't make sense.
We hate, And so, and I think that where we as conservatives and even as Christians sometimes, where we mess up is we fall prey to just these fairness arguments.
Right.
And it's not just about fairness. It's about what we accept in our culture and what we want our culture to be, what we want our kids to grow up in. I don't think, people that allow their daughters to train and to work and to labor, nobody in their right mind wants her to go and lose a trophy or lose a scholarship to a girl. Right? So that's not fair. But far beyond that, it's not right. It should not even be a question as to whether or not they are competing with someone of the opposite sex for something that is gender specific.
Right. Well, and two, if they're training and doing all these things to be involved in these sports, then there's a certain measure of expectation that they should have within their locker rooms as well.
Yeah.
And not having to worry about getting knocked out by a guy.
Right.
I know in swimming, it's a non-contact, so you're not going to get injured if a man competes against you, or running. But they're, like you said, they're doing the mixed martial arts. They're doing basketball. They're doing volleyball, softball. These different types of sports, that it's very dangerous.
Yes.
And I know that if women are in sports and they drug test and they're doing steroids or something to make them, a little more, stronger or different things, would they get in trouble?
Yes.
Okay. So these men that are women, saying they're women and becoming women, they're taking things that would suppress things, right? And so
Yes.
it's supposed to be a certain level, and it's still, even when they're at that level, it's still not fair. It's
That's
still
right.
okay. But a lot of them, their level is not where it's supposed to be.
Correct.
So why are they not penalized? Because I think some of the penalties, like at first, certain things happen, but then you're banned from.
Well, if you notice, the Olympics tried to suppress the physicals and all the testing that happened before the boxing match, and everybody was calling it out.
Yeah.
And then it became public, and everybody's like, well, it's exactly what we thought. But then the shock factor was already over, and they were trying to move on.
Yeah.
But this is what we've done. We have traded truth for feelings. We've made this an emotional issue. And in the broader aspect of our culture, we have seen social media. We have seen even some of the school districts. We've seen spineless, quote unquote, leaders that have pushed this on young people. And I believe that a lot of it is a social contagion. I think that young people, they are bombarded with this mindset on social media. They're spending hours and hours of screen time scrolling through, and they're hit with this constantly. And the reason being is it is to promote that passiveness and that bleeding heart, that, misplaced compassion for the issue. And then all of a sudden, if you have a class member that identifies as a boy, that identifies as a girl, and then they want to play on the girls' basketball team, of course, all the young girls on there don't want to hurt his feelings.
Right.
They don't want to be mean. They don't want to be seen as somebody that's a bigot and that hates, and because that's what the left frames this as. If you take that position, and they target young people for a reason. They want to change the culture. And that's why it's such a contentious issue, because it's an all-out war for common sense and God-ordained normalcy.
And it's not, I mean, I know you talk about it's not a fairness factor, but it isn't fair.
No.
No matter how they try to fix it to make it fair, it's not fair for them to have to do that, for girls to have to compete against them. It's not safe. It's not safe for them on the field or off the field. And if you, as a parent, if you're a parent or if you're an aunt or an uncle, you think about if you have a 16-year-old niece or daughter in the locker room and there's a 16, 17, 18-year-old male in there and is watching her undress or showing himself while he undresses, that's not okay.
No.
And I don't think that anybody would stand up and fight for that and say, yeah, that is okay. I want that to happen to my daughter. You wouldn't say that.
No, but it happens and nobody goes at the moment and addresses it.
Yeah.
And the other part of that too is, and you know, I talked about where are the men? Where are the feminists?
Oh, yeah.
Where are all these women that talked about women's spaces and women's rights and women this and women that and men get out of our lives and leave us alone and let us do our thing? And it just goes to show all of that was a facade. It was a political thing. It was nothing about what was right, or they would be on their platform right now screeching the same way they were when they said they wanted to be equal to men.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And what's sad is instead of the men or the women that had these groups, the loud voices crying out, you have how old did you say that young girl was? 15. 15-year-old girl has to address her coach, has to address the male person, and has to deal with an ethics complaint.
Congratulations, Frances. Thank you for taking a stand when men around you didn't.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad that nobody stood up for her.
And the same thing with Libby. I mean, Miss Libby, I mean, taking a stand when men around her are not.
And is anyone trying to help that representative?
There's been a big national push. So when Riley Gaines found out about it, she called out the troops, and they actually had a bunch of people show up in their state to stand with her. And so it's been good to see people stand with her. But most of the people you hear from are women that are standing. And there's been some great Tim Burchett from Tennessee, who is in the Congress. You know, we've seen some of our Congressman Massey here has taken a stand. Yeah. All of our congressmen have taken a stand on this. Every one of them are going to vote for that bill. I'm confident if it makes it over to the House. But Senator Tuberville, who used to be a coach, is carrying that bill. And I believe he coached at Auburn. But anyway, he's carrying that bill and speaking out very firmly on this issue. The problem is at the point, if at the point of when it happened, we would have had men that would have just put an end to it, just said it's not going to happen, we're not going to do this, let all the leftists whine, let them cry, let them screech, let them take you to court, do whatever you're going to do, but we are not going this direction as a society. I believe we could have kept it from growing to this level. And people will say, well, you know, you're talking about of all the thousands and thousands of athletes, you know, such a small percentage. One is too many. One's not acceptable.
And what if it's against your daughter?
That's right.
Then what?
What if it's the trophy that she was going to get? What if it's a scholarship she was going to get? What if it's her that that he exposed himself to? You just have to understand that this is just not right. And it's broader in our society, because this is not just about sports.
Right.
But this is about all spaces.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. If you go to the mall, if there was in Minnesota, there's this man who parades around as if he is a woman in the house in Minnesota. And he's delusional, and they've been debating a bill to address this. And he basically said, you know, if this bill passes, he said, the gym I work out at here in town, he's like, I could get charged with indecent exposure for going in there and changing in the locker room or the dressing room in this gym. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is he not already? Why has somebody not already thrown him out of there if their wife was in there, or their daughter was in there, or their girlfriend was in there?
That's That just blows my mind that nobody has said anything or done anything to this point or tried to address the issue. I guess they're just afraid of pushback.
They are. And here's the thing is that the need for legislation around this issue just goes to show how passive we have become in our nation. And I saw some stats come out today. Charlie Kirk, I think it was, had put out some stats about some of the changes that are taking place in America and broke it out by age group of percentage. And the younger the age group, the more, I think that the higher the percentage was of support for the strong stand that is being taken right now in our country with so many of these social issues, with the overseas issues. And so it looked as if the 18 to 39 age group are more supportive than any other age group. And I told somebody today, and I think I even put out something about it, and basically just said, we've got some generations behind us that have failed this country. Their silence was seen as consent.
Right.
Their passiveness allowed things to transpire that should have never happened. They should have never, but people just keep your head down. Just, don't rock the boat.
Right.
Hopefully, as long as they don't bother us, just let me raise my family and do my thing. I know what it's like to have that mentality. And can I tell you something? They're not going to leave you alone. The left is evil, and evil never rests.
And they're patient. They wait for the perfect opportunity.
That's exactly right.
They'll wait a long time.
That's exactly right.
That's just
Well,
crazy.
This is the thing. It's a really simple issue. It's this simple. God created male and female. Male and female created he them, as what Genesis 1 tells us. It's that simple. Like we don't even have to go, we don't have to go, we could talk about, XX plays against XX and XY plays against XY, and we can get into the science of it and the biology of it. And people use the term gender. They'll say biological sex. It's just male and female. And we fall prey to the way they term it. And we, use the transgender word. There's no such thing. And I think if we can just take it back to black and white, the way that God made it, make it very simple. Biology's not bigotry.
Right.
It's just truth. And the truth matters.
Yeah. Trans women are not women. If you're a woman, that's all you need. It's just you're a woman. Exactly.
Well, there's been a lot of bills that are coming or that have been passed, a lot that are coming. And this is the bottom line. God drew two lines, male and female.
Right.
And we also have a constitution that's not a costume. It's not men don't get to hijack women's places just because they claim to be a woman.
Right.
And so we all have individual rights and we have individual liberties, but we also have truth and fact. And we have to make sure that we draw the line where God draws the line. And if we do that, we can be a blessed nation. We can be a safe nation. And we can not allow people to totally destroy themselves in delusion. That's what's happening with our young people. When I filed the bill to eliminate taxpayer funding of gender transitions, it was because somebody had reached out to me and said that in women's prisons that women were getting transitional medications and surgeries. And so I asked the Cabinet of Health and Family Services. They said they denied it, said it wasn't going on. And so I had a bill drafted in August of last year. Well, about November timeframe, the cabinet comes to the Administrative Regs Committee and they try to sneak this regulation through and admitted, maybe there is some gender transitioning going on in jails and prisons.
Right.
Okay. And so I went ahead and filed the bill when I went into session, and the cabinet sends me an email here not too long ago, and they tell me that if my bill passes, that ends all funding, state and local funding for gender transitioning, which would basically be Medicare, K-CHIP, Medicaid, those types of things, that 10 to 15,000 Kentuckians are going to lose their care, their transitioning care. And they said that it's going to cost the state an additional up to $21 million because of all the psychological trouble that these people are going to have, psychological hospitalizations. And I'm saying this, one, because that's absolutely absurd that a taxpayer would have to pay for this to happen.
Right.
But what we are doing is we are allowing this delusion to go on. And these people do not get the help that they need. They get affirmed in this. And before you know it, their life is destroyed. Their body is mutilated. Their minds are destroyed. And they need help, but not that kind of help.
Right.
And I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I think that's common sense. And so this is an issue that's going on. We'd love to hear from you about it. We'd like to know what you think. If you'll comment, if you'll like, subscribe, share this video. If you have some things in regard to this issue or some other issue you'd like for us to address and discuss, we would love to do that. But common sense is not so common anymore. It's become uncommon. But right is still right. Truth is still truth. Fact is still fact. And when we stand on truth and fact, we have stability. This nation was built on it. Our Constitution was built on it. We were founded upon these common sense principles. And if you look at what has happened, some of these things have just happened like this. We were being set up for it, but it's not very long ago. I remember 5 minutes ago when nobody had a problem with saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman.
Right. Yeah.
But here we are. And this is what we're dealing with, and we'll go at it from a legal standpoint. I am committed to that as a legislator. But as a society, we need you to stand up, speak up, and just affirm consistently that what God said from the very beginning is so, and promote that in the kids that are coming up in this country. And we will see this country continue to move forward and continue to be blessed by God. Thank you, and God bless.